Welcome. I think we have all the bugs worked out here and we're ready to go. So if you'll come in and sit down, we'll get started. My name is John Rogers, and I'm an environmental manager with the Division Oil, Gas, and Mining. At this time, I'd like to thank Duchesne County for providing this wonderful facility for us to meet in, and for providing the morning break snacks there. The division appreciates the support of for this meeting. It's been ongoing for 25 years, started with about 7 people, and I think we've come a long ways. It's really a forum for industry, government, and the public to get together and talk about the needs of industry out in the Uinta Basin. The goal of the division is one of the major goals is to promote responsible development of energy, make it affordable and abundant, but make it responsible. And those things we're going to talk about today in some of our issues. Right now, I'd like to recognize Senator Ron Winterton. We appreciate your support. Representative Christine Watkins, I saw you walk in, thank you. And Representative Steve Lund, thank you, appreciate you being here. With this support we have in at the political level in the legislature, it goes a long ways to help us get done with what we're doing. I also like to thank Duchesne County Commissioners. I saw them in. Where are they at? Thank you, Greg. Thank you. And Irene, where are you at? Thank you. Appreciate you, okay? And appreciate you providing this facility for us. As you see up here, you've probably seen this graph. I change it every quarter. But I want to give you a quick idea of where we're at and where we're going, okay? This is oil production for the first 3 months of the year. We have a lag time getting in, so we are not like real time. But if you look there, look at that trends from back in 20. We're still up. We're going up, down, but we are approaching almost on average 5 million barrels a month. Last year we had 56 million barrels produced. That was a record. With this same rate, we're on track to maybe be at 60, another record. So production is up. Let's look at the gas side a little bit here. Oh, I got it right here. Okay, Matt, what am I doing wrong here? Okay. You can see gas, and it's bounced up significantly too. So gas production is very important there. So there's many things that. Oh,
I'm just going to fix this for the other side.
Oh, it's not there.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Now I do these forecasts on a monthly basis, and as you look at today, you're really just kind of guessing what's going to be happening a year from now. But we take the best information we have. But when you look at things that affect production out here, there's first the economics. What is commodity prices? Do you remember back when oil went to negative 39? When I saw that, I thought, that's a typo. Oil can't be negative. So look at where we come. So commodity prices is very critical, along with our gas prices. Getting the oil to market is another critical issue. We have the railroad that's in limbo right now. But now we have trying to get more oil down to the Carbon County area and getting that railed out to the Gulf Coast. And then there's operational concerns. How are the economics of the overall country affecting production? So that's critical there. The environmental issues, air and water. We'll be talking about a few of those things today. Political pressures. Enough said, okay? We know where that's headed, so that's something to keep an eye on, okay? Because it's going to be critical to this industry in the next few months. And the operations, drilling technology. We're going to have some talks on that today. I did a pooling matter as a hearing officer, and I saw we had the first 3-mile laterals. I don't know if that's going to become commonplace, but that was really, first I saw that. We went from 2 to 3. A few years ago, going from 1 to 2 was a big deal. So I'm not sure where this is going to stop, but operational is a big deal. And then I did a few hearings yesterday, and I noticed they have in there for AFE, authorization for expenditure. I remember when I did these a few years ago, a horizontal well was about $15 million. Now the one yesterday was 7.5. So that's considerable decrease in expenses, and also, obviously, with that decrease in expenses, it helps that. So all those issues focused here where we're going with our production. So those are just some things I wanted to share with you. I think we're trending in a good position here. And so our first panel, or our first talk today, will be Oil and Gas Production Panel, Then and Now, Industry Evolution and Technology, Operation, and Water Conservation. The panelists will be Rikki Hrenko-Browning, President of the UPA, Representative Steve Lund, we already recognized him already from the House of Representatives, and Thomas Frank, Ovintiv, I'm Operation Manager for Drilling for Ovintiv. So we'll have them come up here, and we'll give them each a microphone, and as they go through their presentations, keep those questions in the back of your mind so we can have some good questions for us and so you can go forward. This is exactly what we want to do so the public can see where the industry is headed and what we can do to support that and be on the side of responsible development. Goes a long way there. So, Rikki, I'll turn the time over to you. Do you have slides on here? Okay, Matt? He's getting there.
All right, good morning, folks. Thanks, John, for the introduction to our panel today. And you did a great job of kind of segueing into what we're going to talk about today in terms of how the industry is evolving and changing. And I've got some great panelists here with me today that are going to speak to that. But we thought we would start in a moment by just talking a little bit, and I'm going to stay down here and just use the clicker to advance slides if that
You're
works.
okay to see this?
I can see it, yeah, that's great. We thought we would start today, except I can't see this one, which is the one that moves. Okay, by talking about kind of the baseline of where we are before we get into a discussion around, as John said, how the drilling technology is really changing and the domino effects of what that's doing in a number of different ways. And to this group, most of you are intimately familiar with this, but not everyone. And I think it's always just kind of helpful to take a deep dive and kind of look at what is going on and what has changed. So to start with, just kind of setting the baseline. Where are we? And this is a little bit preaching to the choir, but for the last couple of years, we've really heard the term energy transition consistently. And what we like to say, or what UPA's kind of position on that is it's really an energy amplification. Oil and gas is not going away. If you look at the US EIA projections, which is what's shown on that top left slide there, the top one is global projections, the bottom one is US projections. Oil and gas is going to continue to grow through their 2050 projection window. We're not going away. We are going to see additional forms of energy. We're going to see more renewables as well. And we are going to need all of the energy that we can get, right, globally and here in the United States. But I think sometimes we get a little bit bogged down, particularly with our federal administration and the regulatory challenges that we have been facing. But it's important to remember to celebrate. We are the world's largest oil producer. We are the world's largest natural gas producer. We are the world's largest exporter of natural gas, and that plays a vital role to the global geopolitical environment as well when we look at who we're exporting to. If we zoom into Utah, we are a very critical piece of that puzzle. John had updated data this morning, which I don't have on this slide. I've just got our 2022 data, but as he showed, that graph just keeps going up, up, up with record production the last 2 years. And it's really exciting. The state's gone from the 10th to now the 9th largest oil producer, and we're nipping at the heels of Wyoming coming ahead. We're excited to see where we get to in the next few years. A lot of that has changed kind of what we see here, particularly on the Duchesne side. So the graphs on the right-hand side, hopefully you can see that, are showing production by county. So the top chart is oil production, the bottom chart is natural gas production. The blue bars are Duchesne County, the orange bars are Uinta County. So when you look at where oil is coming from, look at how that blue bar has grown over the last couple of years. Production has really grown in Duchesne County, and it's become the epicenter, as our county commissioners and many of you know. But as we work with state legislators and other folks, I think that maybe there's not quite as much of a recognition from some of your colleagues as to how this has changed and why it has changed. And then if we look at where production is happening, and I have to thank Bart and the division for letting me steal some of their graphics here, But the large pie chart on the left is our existing well portfolio. That big yellow chunk is federal production. If you then kind of transition over to those next two graphs, you see that yellow chunk getting smaller and smaller. The top one are APDs up to 2022, so it's 2013 to 2022, and then APDs on the bottom for 2024. So you just see that yellow chunk, that federal chunk, playing less and less of a role as we move forward with new production. What you also see there is that big red piece of the pie, and that's the multiple mineral development, which John queued up really well. You know, we're now talking about 3-mile-long laterals. As you all know, you can't go 3 miles anywhere in the basin and be in one type of jurisdiction. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some of that drilling technology evolution in just a minute. But we're seeing that. You know, the data always kind of lags reality, but we're starting to see that data. And then just an update on kind of who's who in the basin. And this is changing, and this will be looking very different in a year from now. But it's interesting. In our basin, you know, we've got 5 to 6 producers, whether we're talking about oil or natural gas, that are making up about 85% of the production. So it's a pretty small cohort that we're talking about. And there's some real advantages to that as we work through some of the regulatory challenges to be able to come together and find commonality and a common voice. There's also some challenges with that in terms of where we are in the basin and the infrastructure developments that are going to be needed and the investments that are going to be needed to get us there. We're a pretty small cohort to fund that kind of infrastructure. So pros and cons. And we know that a number of these names and the logos on the hats are going to be changing for a few of these folks in the next little while. I'll go pretty quickly through this. You all know this very well. You've seen this many times, but this is, and it looks like this one's lagging.
Oh, yeah, that's me.
No problem. Okay. Our production chart. So just an update on kind of where we are. We're still sending 85 to 90,000 barrels a day up to the Salt Lake refining market. Basin-wide, we're at about 160,000 barrels a day of production, with the rest of that going out through the export terminal. And if you think about it, in a matter of about 3 years, we have basically doubled the state's oil production. That is incredible in that quick of a time period. And as John showed just a minute ago, that chart just continues on its upward trajectory. So I'll keep my crystal ball to myself as to where I think we're going. But the export market has really significantly changed things and our ability to rail product out. That's had some really big implications for the state. This is showing severance tax back to the state of Utah. You'll see it's almost 118 million last year. If you compare that to a few years ago where we were providing 30, 35 million to the state, that is a significant additional revenue stream. One of the challenges is that all does go into the state's general fund. Duchesne County, Uinta County do not get those dollars back to deal with very real impacts that we have here, whether that's roads, whether that's other infrastructure, whether that's other resource needs. So that's something that I know Senator Winterton has been committed to working on, and we're going to continue to work on, and the industry is very committed to trying to address some of these local challenges. We're working with the county right now, with Duchesne County on roads, but it's something that's going to take some additional time and attention as we continue to grow and those revenue streams continue to grow. How does the state help support the local community that's funding that growth? And then just some kind of high-level economics. The top left is a summary page, and this is all on our website if anybody's interested in getting some of the economic numbers. It's a summary page from a fiscal analysis that we do every year. This is going back to fiscal year 2022 data, so it's not yet picking up 2023. But what it's showing is the total economic impact from direct fees and taxes of the industry. And what we're looking at is more than $1 billion in direct fees and taxes from the oil and gas industry, upstream and downstream, in 2022. That's huge. We've never been anywhere near that level before. We will be updating these numbers next month, actually, when fiscal year 2023 data is available, and those numbers are going to go up considerably. The other really interesting thing about that top left graph is that Salt Lake had always been the primary driver of where the economic kind of engine or powerhouse for our industry was because of the refining sector and the manufacturing sector and such there. This last year, Uinta County beat Salt Lake for the first time. Uinta County is providing, Uinta County, sorry, is providing more dollars to the state of Utah in direct fees and taxes than Salt Lake from the oil and gas industry. That's a very interesting shift, particularly as we think about the fact that those 5 refineries are pretty limited in their ability to continue to grow and expand because of air quality challenges and air quality caps, whereas the basin is going to continue to grow. So again, as we think through the infrastructure needs that we're going to have here in the basin to support this continued development, and we think about where those dollars are coming from into the state, there's a pretty significant shift that is coming that we need to continue to educate and advocate on. There's just a couple highlights there, but again, if you want to drill down into any of this data, we provide this on a county by county basis, so you can see how much property tax or sales tax or wages are coming out of each county across the state from the oil and gas industry, and we'll have an update of that again in about a month or so here. We need to do an update, but what we've got here on the left is just kind of a summary from PwC on broader economic impacts, so number of jobs, number of indirect and induced economic benefits. Again, pretty significant, and this is only going back to 2021 data, so we're not even really capturing that full growth yet. But what we're showing is $15 billion in GDP to the state of Utah. That's a lot, and that's going to go up quite a bit when we get these numbers updated. And then, of course, we all know that we're major contributors to the school and institutional trust lands, to our public education. We are, again, the #1 revenue stream for SITLA, and actually year over year have doubled the amount of revenue going into SITLA's fund. So very significant, as you all know, but it's nice to see those numbers. So with that as kind of the high-level baseline, we wanted to turn the time over to Thomas Frank, who's going to talk to us from Ovintiv, from their perspective on some of the changes that have really been driven by advancements in drilling technology and some of the domino effects that have come into that. So Thomas, I'm going to turn the time over to you.
All right, y'all hear me okay? Oop. Am I good back there on the mic? All right. Apologize, I'm not used to speaking into a mic, so it might like kind of come back and forth, might get kind of loud. But I'm Thomas Frank, Ovintiv drilling manager. We put these slides together knowing that there's a myriad of different backgrounds in here, so apologies, like if you have an extensive drilling background and it's a little boring, please feel free to interrupt. It is panel discussion, or if it's unfamiliar and you have any more questions, come find me afterwards and we can talk about it a little bit more. Let's see. So the now and then, as you drive around this area, you see a lot of the pumping jacks, quite a bit of equipment. So on the left there, you have your vertical wells. I think a lot of people are familiar with the 20-acre and 40-acre spacing. So you kind of envision that. The circles are wellhead locations, and each one of those could be its own pad. It could have 1 or 2. Could have 3, so quite a bit of, surface disturbance, quite a bit of trucking, quite a bit of, lines being run between each one. So probably, unconventional shale in the last 20 years. We started out with 5Ks, the 1-mile laterals, and you can see that in the right there to the left middle. And so we have one pad there on the bottom left. We went in, we kind of evaluated the area with 1-mile lateral. It's one pad. And then we came in and, we didn't know what was really possible. Some of the technology was lagging. The rigs, the pumps, the capabilities, the know-how, fluids, everything that goes into drilling a well. So we had separate pads. You couldn't directionally drill, more than a mile vertically, but you could kick off and go horizontal within the formation. And I'm sorry, I forgot to explain the graphics on the top. That's kind of just showing you like a you've got a bird's eye view down below, and then kind of a cross section, what you're looking at. So you have the vertical, then you have a horizontal where you're actually drilling sideways through where you want to hydraulically complete and then produce out of. So you can see that it's quite a few, it's a lot less development, a lot less surface disturbance. And then over the last several years, we've gotten quite a bit better. So we've gone from 1, 2, 3, 4 pads into one larger pad. And what that does is it takes away quite a bit of trucking, quite a bit of lines being laid, a whole bunch of surface disturbance. There's a lot of efficiencies around, we could use less rigs. There's also quite a bit of, thinking around, where does the pad need to be in relation to what infrastructure already exists, so there's not a lot of waste there. And so in that example, there's about 9 wells. They're really illustrative examples. They're not like exactly what we're doing. Some of those may be like stacked horizons where, you've got 300 foot of true vertical depth between them. And then we kind of already got a little bit of a hint at the longer laterals. And so what we've done recently is some of the stranded sections where you may only do like a 5K or any of that, we've pushed into actually extending another mile. So the rigs, the pumps, everything's come a long ways in the understanding of what we're actually capable of, and pushed into, now you've got, instead of having 3 or 4 pads, 1 pad covering 3 sections. And that does quite a bit on, you think about it, we're just drilling the wells here. There's also completions who comes in. There's the sand traffic, the water, the infrastructure, and then you've got the production here in the Uinta Basin. It's tough to get it out of here. We've got to truck it. So you've all driven on the 2-lane roads and you've seen the tandems, and they're kind of spooky, right? And I think we've had quite a few things. So, just less of those traveling around from location to location, I think is a win. So, any questions around the drilling piece? So another win that we've done here in the basin, and I think a lot of the operators here, we've done a lot of research around what kind of sand to use for the hydraulic fracs. And there's 2 maps here. One is what we used to use at Ovintiv for a sand mine, which was just north of Vernal. And then at the bottom is where our new in-basin sand mine is. And so what the advantage here is, which the next slide will kind of cover, is there's quite a bit of economics around that. And then also just, there's less traffic on the roads, right? We don't want to be, we want to be stewards of the environment. We don't want to have to be wasteful. We want to be very, very we want to be efficient in how we do things here. So we went ahead and found some quality sand right next to the pad, and there's probably the figures there. There's probably 4,000 to 4,500 truckloads for a 9-well development, and so you can imagine taking those amount of trucks off the road between here and Vernal is a major win for efficiency. So on that sand, there's quite a few things in it. We've moved from a dry sand, which you had to rail in, and then you had to truck to location, and then use at location. That wet sand takes out quite a bit of logistics with it. You don't have to rail it in. You just mine it at the location, and then you don't have to dry it, so there's a lot less energy in there. And then that time between, how much sand leaves the sand mine to location is quite a bit less. So really just, this slide highlights the efficiencies around that. I won't go into the details around it. For us, the economics around it, we've got to be very efficient on our costs. The basin is unique. We have to bring in several, we have to abide by the UTERO compliances, and we have to bring in people that are UTERO certified. So there's not a lot of, leeway on who we can bring in. And so that brings a lot of jobs in. We're doing it right on location. And so we have to be efficient on our costs. And what this wet sand mine does is it brings a lot of jobs into the basin where we're working, and it also reduces our well cost by 400 to 500,000. So big win there on just going to wet sand in basin. And then I will hand it over to Steve Lund here. Talk about produced water, and I'll piggyback to how we're handling that as we go forward.
Great. Excuse me. Thank you, Thomas. Appreciate it. And thank you, Rikki, for providing this venue and this opportunity to speak. I don't have any slides. In fact, if you drive that, I'd appreciate it. There's a lot of pressure being here, and when Senator Winterton walked in, and when Representative Chu walked in, and when Representative Watson walked in, for me the pressure just increased a great deal. I respect these people, and they're good friends of mine, and honestly I do believe they represent the basin very, very well. There's no one that fights the fight for water in the basin like Representative Chu, and there's no one that fights the fight for transportation in and out of the basin like Senator Winterton. And there's no one that actually fights the fight in general as a whole like Representative Watkins, all the way down to the state stone, right? And so it's a fortunate group that has representation like Duchesne County and Uinta County has. My background is in oil and gas professionally, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this water production bill. Back in the late 1800s, the state conscientiously made the statement and made the decision to state that all waters in the state of Utah belong to the state of Utah. Thank you. So at that time, if you think about it, there hadn't been very many wells drilled. In fact, there hadn't been any oil wells drilled. What they knew is they knew the surface water and they knew the water cycle itself. As drilling began and the first wells were finally starting to be produced in the early 1900s, some of those wells produced water, and they had to figure it out, in particular in the Ashley Valley. So the Ashley Field, when it began to produce water, there was this question, what is that water, who owns that water, and what do we do with that produced water? And since that time, the decision on how we deal with produced water has evolved. There was a time that you could run it down the ditch. There was a time you could use it for dusting or for dust control on the roads, and those days are gone. Having said that, there is a great need for water, as we know, when it comes to fracking, when it comes to drilling. And so we have to figure out where that water is going to come from. In the past, that water has come out of the water cycle, and which puts a lot of pressure on the agriculture industry, puts a lot of pressure on the culinary industry, and a lot of pressure on industry at large. Thomas, could you show? Yeah, Rikki's got some. Keep going. Yeah, right there. If I'm going to have to get up and walk around. I'm a little bit ADD, so I feel better if I can walk around some. If you look at this, this is the pressure that this bill takes off of agriculture and off of domestic uses. And what I want to do right now is I want to pause for a minute. The real prime mover, I was just the mouthpiece on this. The real prime mover on this bill was Rikki. The Utah Petroleum Association, once upon a time, as I first moved back into the state years and years ago from working in New Mexico and West Texas, UPA was on life support, in my opinion, and I didn't want anything to do with it. However, at present, the UPA is one of the foremost organizations when it comes to oil and gas production, not only in the Rockies but throughout the nation. And I'll be honest with you, I honestly think it has a lot to do with who's at the helm of that organization, and that's Rikki. So Rikki's driving this, and the reason Rikki's driving it is because she responds to industry. And she responds to industry in the most expeditious and efficient ways she can. When you look at this, y'all can see it. It says wells drilled, 290 on average per year, 62% horizontal. They're all fracked, and so that's 180 wells requiring frack jobs. Fracking water use is 1.5 to 16 million barrels, or 60 million gallons per well. So there's a great deal of pressure on that. What this water bill did, this produced water bill, is it saved, or it took a lot of that pressure off the domestic uses for water. And with the water that we're able to save right now, and these numbers are going to be eclipsed in years to come. But right now, we save enough water to actually water or irrigate a section of ground, to actually provide domestic water for 490 homes, and to provide water for almost 79,000 head of cattle. And that just comes out of the industry. The industry didn't have to do this. The industry could have just could have lived with the status quo and said, we need more water. Central Utah, we want more water. We're going to have to figure something out. Uinta County, Duchesne County, Carbon County, Wasatch Front, you guys are going to have to figure out how to get us more water if you want more severance tax and more revenues. But the industry itself stepped up and says, you know what, we have an awful lot of water that we get rid of. And honestly, from a reservoir engineering perspective, it makes, can you hear this? Yeah. It makes a lot of sense from a reservoir engineering perspective to use the water that you actually produce. From a chemical perspective, and it's just prudent engineering and prudent oil field practices to use that water any way you can. So what this bill does is it says any produced water that you produce, you can capture that water, and you can use that water to frack with on your own locations. If there's a trade, if you need to make a trade with a neighbor or with a producer next to you, you can actually use that water and make that trade. You cannot put this water into the domestic system. You cannot put this water on the roads. There are some very narrow stipulations and very narrow regulations with this bill, so that it's tailored specifically for the oil and gas industry. Now, why did we do that? The reason we did that is because we don't want this water adjudicated. We don't want this water to actually become an argument of discussion and go to the highest bidder who wants to buy this as a water right. If you make the conscious decision that you want to clean this water up, that you want to put it back into potable conditions, or conditions that you can release into the streams and get a water right for it, then that's your business and you can do that. However, that's beyond the scope of this bill. All this bill does is it makes sure that in the oil and gas industry, if we can reduce our costs by using produced water, we ought to. If we can improve the environment by using produced water, we ought to. And that's not to say that it's for every producer. I happen to be the very smallest producer of oil and gas in the state, probably in the nation. However, I still have water that I got to get rid of. And because I have water that I got to get rid of, it's expensive, and I need to bring it from Carbon County all the way over to Duchesne County to dispose of it. So we're still going to have a need for companies and businesses that handle produced water. There's no doubt about it. But the evolution is impressive and encouraging as far as how we deal with produced water here in the basin. What else can I?
I would just say that you're being extremely modest. This bill would not have happened had Representative Lund not had the patience and wherewithal to calmly engage with the water community, who were highly skeptical when we first brought this idea forward, and the support of the other legislators in this room as well was really, really critical.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Most of that's not true. However, if you didn't have the representation you'd have, you wouldn't have got this. Representative Chu, Senator Winterton, and Representative Watkins, they jumped on board. They were early adopters of this, and they pushed. I'm the junior legislator in this room right now, and so these more senior legislators were very quick to jump on this and say, this makes a lot of sense. And then the county commissioners from Duchesne County and from Uinta County, they jumped on board and said, yeah, we see a value here, and we want to move this thing forward. And
So we want to talk about produced water a little bit more. The division after this is going to talk about a rulemaking that this triggered, that they're working on, and give an update of their water recycle rule and some terms and conditions that are associated with how to implement this bill. But we also wanted to talk from a practical point of view about what we're doing. And several of you in this room have started or already have water recycle facilities. But we'll let Thomas talk a little bit more about what Ovintiv is doing on the water recycle front.
All right, thank you. Representative Lund and Rikki, thank you for pushing this through. This is very important to us. It only makes sense, right? The water that we get from the formation, we put it right back in. So that's kind of what we're talking about when we say produced water. So in the past, the now and then on the left, we would take water from a collector well, take water from the Mighton City tap, either truck it or pipeline it to location and use that in our fracs. And what this will do for us is instead of any kind of trucking or using fresh water that could be used elsewhere, taking from the producing locations nearby, collecting all of that, and it takes quite a bit of logistics. And Ovintiv is still working through a lot of those pieces, but I think XCL has done a really good job with it. So, it's pie in the sky. We have a lot of experience doing it down in Texas, and then have done it in Oklahoma as well. So, we're looking forward to doing this. That's quite a bit better on the logistics, and we keep touting, right, efficiency and being stewards of the environment. So it's just less trucking. So it's going to be a great thing for the state of Utah once we get through and we put in our logistics around it, and we're excited about it.
If I could just jump in real quick there. I appreciate Thomas mentioning Texas and Oklahoma doing this and being early adopters of this practice. We use the state of New Mexico, we use Texas, and we also use North Dakota's produced water laws as a go-by on our legislation. We wanted to make sure that what we presented had precedence, and so we feel like we're on pretty solid ground based upon the legislation that's happened in these other producing states.
And I'll just add to that, we're continuing to watch what's going on in Texas and New Mexico specifically as they're looking at ways to kind of take this one step further and utilize this water in other ways and how they're dealing with that from a water rights perspective. So we don't have anything on the horizon for this next session to make any tweaks to this bill, but we are watching to see how that plays out in these other jurisdictions. Use case that we can follow here as well to even more broadly utilize produced water and save on those efficiencies.
I'm going to go a little bit off the rails here, and I know Rikki's going to cringe, but when we're just at the very tip of the iceberg on this produced water. When you think about it, we are in the second driest state of the nation. The first driest state of the nation is just to the west of us, and water has a great deal of value. Without doubt, water has a great deal of value, and so does the minerals within that water. Now, in the Uinta Basin, the produced water is relatively low TDS, but you get down into the Paradox Basin, and you can get upwards of 120,000 parts per million. And so it gets things just change rapidly depending on where you are in a basin and range state. However, if you can look at this water, and if when the really, really smart kids grow up and figure out how to clean water up and turn and make it potable and fresh, the basin itself produces almost 3 million barrels of water a year or more. That becomes a significant amount of water. And at some point in time, that water is going to have a value that makes it economic to do it. And I really think that not only should we focus on the produced water that we're dealing with right now and use it as responsible as we can, but somewhere we've got to encourage our kids, and we've got to encourage the really, really smart people in the room to figure out a way to utilize this water in a much more productive way. Re-injecting it into the ground is a good Band-Aid, but that's all it is a Band-Aid. It's not really a long-term prudent practice, even especially from an engineering perspective. Engineers are are typically trained to look at efficiencies, and from an engineering perspective, we really need to figure out how to do this. Can you imagine the amount of agriculture you could have in the basin or in the state of Utah if you had more water? And all of that agriculture dovetails in, and it's all part and parcel of the natural resources, which we are all here about. And so keep looking at ways to clean the water up if you possibly can. Thanks.
So shifting gears a little bit, Thomas talked about drilling technology evolution and how these larger multi-well pads with horizontals going out now several miles at this point has really kind of changed the way that we operate, right? It means that there's a scale that makes things that were not economic in the past economic now. You know, you talked about that from the sand mining perspective where, I don't know, is it fair to say that 5 years ago, the vast majority of sand that was coming into the state was being railed from the Midwest? And now we're probably at a point where roughly 90% of our sand is in-basin sand across the industry, right?
Yep.
So things are changing really quickly. Similar with produced water, it's that scale that allows us to be able to invest in the infrastructure to make that possible. We're going to talk at the Uinta Basin Energy Summit coming up in September as well about some of these other infrastructure improvements and how we're dealing with these constraints, whether it's the sand logistics, whether it's roads, whether it's water reuse, whether it's the need for electrification and increased pipeline capacity to move gas out of the basin. So we wanted to give a little sneak peek on one of those today, and Thomas is going to talk a little bit about electrification and the microgrid project that Ovintiv is working on as well, because as we continue to grow this basin, electrification is going to be absolutely critical, including from an air quality and an emissions perspective, and we're having to get really creative about how we go about that. So Thomas, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I think the graphs earlier show there's a disconnect between natural gas being produced in the basin and making out of the basin. So the other challenge here in the Central Basin and areas that just getting electricity for our own usage. So some really clever people have come up with finding generators that are very low emissions and taking that natural gas and we're able to generate electricity to run our own facilities, and these facilities can have quite a bit. So instead of flaring that gas, we're using it to put it back into powering our batteries, our SWDs, our pumps, and then anything excess. Actually, there's been a good amount of work done around putting that back onto the grid. So the local community kind of gets to enjoy that generation of power, but still need to be working on, getting the hydrocarbons out of the basin, and that's a big challenge still that's in front of us.
So just a sneak peek, we'll talk about it a little bit more at the Energy Summit coming up in September, and also we should give a shout out to Ute Energy and UX, who have also just gone through a ribbon cutting on their microgrid project here in the basin. So you're starting to see some of that evolution as well. Representative Lund, speaking of really clever people and the need for power, I think you had a few thoughts you wanted to share.
I did. Thank you. There are some clever things coming up. Thomas, could you go back to the gas production slide?
I don't know if it's in the same one.
Is that in this deck?
Oh, here we go. Back.
So I don't have a crystal ball either, but what I want to do is just take a look at this at one of these charts coming up here. Right now, we are on a really, really comfortable trend when it comes to producing oil and gas. The downside is that comfortable trend is about to be disrupted. One of the reasons it's about to be disrupted is within the next 10 years, so it's been said, we're going to have to find 10 gigawatts of power. Now, 10 gigawatts of power is on the order of 12 coal-fired power plants. So when you look at that, will it come up? Oh, okay, great. So when you look at that, renewables are not going to do it. They're just simply not. Renewables aren't going to do it. Geothermal isn't even going to do it. it's going to have to come from baseload power, and that baseload power is going to have to be one of two things, either natural gas or coal. That's all there is to it. So getting back to the really smart kids coming up, they're going to have to figure out how to get the CO2 and the NOx and the SOx out of that gas, or out of that combustion stream, that emission stream. So as you look at this trend right here, this is a great trend. However, when you get to 10 gigawatts of power, you can take that 10 gigawatts of power and divide it by 4, and that's roughly the amount of natural gas you're going to need. So you're going to need on the order of about 250 BCF a day to handle 10 gigawatts of power. Who's going to use this power? The power is going to be used by the people that drive artificial intelligence and some of these machine learning. These are some of the needs that are coming up. And as we look at those needs coming up, where in the state of Utah are you going to get it? There's really one place, and that's the basin. These tech companies, they would love to come to the state of Utah, but some of the headwinds they're fighting is the status quo and how we're going to get power to them. What we have to do, in my opinion, is we have to figure out a way to bring the power companies along with us. Whether it's Rocky Mountain Power or Moon Lake or Dixie Power, whomever it is, we have to figure out a way to get them to come with us. Now, on the other side of that is we have to figure out a way to get the natural gas and the oil out of the basin. And those are going to be some pretty strong headwinds, too, to figure that out. But I just wanted a picture of this. If you look at this, in natural gas, is that in MCF? I'm guessing that's MCF. So if it is, that's 21 BCF right there, and we're up to about 25 BCF of natural gas produced in the state of Utah. That's everywhere. That's the Paradox Basin, the little Covenant Field down in Sevier County, the Uinta Basin here, et cetera. But that's 21 BCF. We have to go to a magnitude of 10 of that if we're going to if these high-tech companies are coming in. And what do these high-tech companies do when they come in? They scream for power, and we would love to give them the power, because what does that do for the state of Utah? All of a sudden, that makes the state of Utah revenue, very, very revenue rich and very, very bullish on the whole idea of getting natural gas out of the basin. So there's, and that's just simply me reading the tea leaves. I could be 100% wrong on that, but there again, AI is not going away, and neither's high tech, and in my opinion, neither's the oil and gas industry. We're just going to simply have to evolve and get stronger with what we're doing on that. That's my rant. Sorry.
No, that's perfect. I think we've got a few minutes. If there's any questions for folks, we're happy to answer any questions. And as Thomas said, he's happy to get into any more detail as well. Okay.
Watching over the years, I've seen horizontal drilling really advance dramatically. And I'm wondering, out here, it obviously driven by the geology, whether it's structure, lithology, or reservoir quality. But on the technology side of drilling, what's the limit how far you can go?
So that's a really fun question, because we've asked that over and over again. And I don't think there is a limit. It's just, what's your patience and what's your capital budget? There's quite a few technology advancements. We've even looked at going another mile, honestly, and we think we can do it. It just takes some patience. You definitely slow down, right? It's just the pace of it. And I think that it can fit in some places. It's really just around kind of just capital and your production budgets and whatnot. So I think you'll see some companies push into the the 20Ks, we'll call them, you know, like two 10Ks together. So it's come a long ways, and it's continuing to evolve.
Just one, I wondered that question too. And I think the longest well was drilled by Exxon to date. And I think it's like 8 miles, and it's over in Russia. But to Thomas's point, what's your appetite for patience and cash?
Right. And so what's interesting about that example is that well, you know, the trajectory really matters. So here in the Uinta Basin, I'm not sure how familiar the folks are with like the geology, but you've got pretty drastic bed dips, which can range from 3 degrees to 4 degrees. It doesn't sound that much, but when you go over 10,000, 5,000, 15,000, it can be as much as, you know, a skyscraper that you're changing vertical depths. So what's interesting about the Exxon one is, you know, they're coming down and drilling almost at that bed dip. So we'll set up locations to go down in bed dip. So that can actually help you on the backside. Really where you start to hit a limit on what you can do is on the completion side. So after you've case cemented, your, you know, perf and plug and moving along there, the technologies, we're advancing some of those, but to go back in and clean the wellbore out so the oil and gas can come back in, that's where the real limit is.
I was talking to some people from North Dakota. Okay, and up there, some people are trying, they're doing a 2-mile and then making a U-turn and coming back. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, so I didn't put it in here, but we are considering U-turns in a couple places. What's nice about those is, like, again, like if you had the stranded 5K, or you have a section where, you know, you don't have the interest or it's developed to the north of you, instead of having, you know, 2 locations or several locations, you drill down and you basically do a U-turn within the section. So, yeah, it's again one of those funny things. It's a lot of steel, but it's funny how it bends at that kind of magnitude. So.
Try cleaning that well out.
Yeah, no, it's not fun. It doesn't look fun, but it's something we can do.
I got one. I've been in water disposal business for most of my life, and actually I got a couple of questions. The scale problems with produced water, I've watched them being pumped back down wells for years, and then they have problems and the well production never comes back. What kind of things have you come up with to fix that? And another thing that's happened is Chevron deference on the federal level. How's that going to affect our regulations with everything that's going forward?
I can take the first part of that. So there's quite a few technologies to clean up the produced water. So you have dissolved solids, right, which can precipitate out, and then you have actual solids. So filtration, you do dewatering, right? I'm sure you're familiar with that. And then, you know, Representative Lund mentioned earlier, like here in the Uinta Basin, the TDS is quite low. So you're having to treat it and do quite a few things. I drew that pit on there, but you're bringing it in, you're knowing what volumes you're going to be using, and you're taking the time to treat it. There's a multitude of ways, which I'm sure you know way more than I do on that. You know, you can deflocculate, take a lot of things, and it is an expense, but it also is probably equivalent to, if you think about the logistics around fresh water, it's very equivalent to that.
It's actually a good question, and it's one that everybody needs to consider, because you don't want to put back into your reservoir anything you can't get out or anything that's going to reduce the permeability in there. And so, to Thomas's point, you still, you know, as far as injecting water, you still have to. Are you down to 40 microns, or are you down smaller than that?
I'm not injecting, I got a disposal pond.
Okay. And But when you're injecting the water, when you're disposing of the water in a well, you've really got to get that water clean, and it's a function of treating it, and it's a function of, as far as the scale problems are concerned. You got to look at the pH of it and make sure you get it fixed. Now, as far as Chevron is concerned, I'm going to do what is really a classic political obfuscate, and I'm going to let that one go right past me to Rikki.
When you got friends like these, right? I think it's going to be very interesting. I think we're going to see a lot more litigation, and I'm going to do a shameless pitch for our Lunch and Learn series. We will actually have some folks from Holland and Hart, from their DC team, that's going to do a little bit of an unbundling and a projection for us at the end of August. So we hold a monthly Lunch and Learn series, and I'll defer to the experts on what they think is going to come, but it's definitely going to be more litigation right now. Now we're going to be relitigating all of these contentious federal rulemakings.
Right down to our air quality and everything else.
Yes.
So here's the thing. The nice thing about Chevron is that it actually took some of the rulemaking pressure off of some of the bureaucrats, and perhaps we can now get industry involved where industry needs to be involved in some of this rulemaking. That would be far better for the nation and far better for the state, and certainly far better for oil production and the environment. So what's Chevron going to do as far as this is concerned? Back to the litigation side. We don't know.
Okay, well, thank you. We give them a hand. Appreciate our panelists. That was very informative, and thank you. We're making a little change up here. We're going to have Bart Kettle with the division come forward and talk about the recycle and water disposal rules, because it fits in right what we were talking about here, and then we'll have Dr. Lyman follow up with that.
I'm going to give an update on various rulemakings the division's doing a little bit later in the collaborative, but I'll talk about recycle facilities and recycling water right now just because it fits in with what the panel talked about. So the first thing is there's two things happening at the same time when we talk about produced water. One is the regulation of the disposal of it in the sense of evaporation ponds or things of that nature is transferring from the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining to the Division of Waste Management and Radiation Control. And that's based on a state law change from the 2019 legislative session. Along with that, there is also some rulemaking and activities underway to enable the recycling of produced water. And they're linked based on the time element of when they're occurring. And then, of course, there's some of the same technologies used in both practices. Outside of that, it's two different lawmaking bills. It's HB 310 from the 2019 session that transfers waste to Waste Management and Radiation Control, and Representative Lund's bill, HB 295, that lays out the overall policy at the state level to enable produced water to be recycled. And if I could just kind of put a plug in right here, I think this audience, don't overlook the importance of this. I was born and raised here in the basin, and for my entire life, I heard people talk about, is there a way we can reuse this water? Is there a way we can reuse this? And as Representative Lund pointed out, since the 1890s, there hasn't been policy in place that really enabled somebody to kind of have the courage to go invest and put infrastructure in it. It's millions of dollars to enable this. Well, at the state law level, we now have that in place. So don't overlook how significant and how important that is. It takes the support of both the local legislatures and the legislature as a whole to get it through people to understand. So anyway, with that in mind, I'm just going to talk on the recycle rulemaking that the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining is working on right now briefly here. So we put out a first draft rule that would lay out how recycling would be done in the state of Utah. And what we're trying to do is get a rule in place that continues to enable recycling per the intent of Representative Lund's bill and provides the baseline kind of framework or rules of the game and stability so that as industry starts to approach a project like this, they know what they've got to face. We got kind of a surprising number of comments back on our first draft. Some really good comments, some comments that we hadn't thought about. So for those of you who took time to comment, we appreciate that. We think it makes a better rulemaking. We took and looked at those comments and are getting prepared to get a second draft of the rule out. And we anticipate that that second draft will be out here shortly. It sounds like maybe it got drafted while I didn't look at my email in this meeting. So it sounds like maybe it's out right now. So shortly is very shortly. And then we're looking forward to receiving comments back from the industry on that rulemaking in late August and engaging in another discussion on it. So it's moving forward. Our hope is that second part of the policy, the rule gets in place by the end of the year. So any industry, anybody looking to invest in this, they know what they're facing and they know how to do it. And with that, I'll just pause right there and see if there's any questions.
Question is, are your regulations, I guess I would say, developing a concept for recycling at a central facility where there would be recycled water out, or a mobile facility that would go to, to a completions job where they would recycle the water at the well.
Okay, good question. So the question was, do the rules contemplate more long-term central facilities that could be there over the course of decades and shorter-term facilities? And yes, they do. As we know, there'll have to be some investment. I'm kind of struggling with this microphone too. Some investment into more permanent long-term structures that'll be there for decades. The reference is a long-term facility in the rules. And then we also recognize, because the well pads themselves occur in different locations through the basin, and there's a need to have infrastructure closer associated with those well pads for logistics. So they also contemplate setting out the ability for operators to have something that's more short-term in nature and more flexible for them to get in place in a more quickly turnaround period. Okay, hearing no more, I'll turn the time back over to John Rogers.
Okay, thank you, Bart. Let's give him a hand for clearing that up for us. Appreciate it. We'll now go back on schedule with Dr. Seth Lyman of Utah State University, and he'll talk about the Ozone Working Group.
Check, check.
Thanks a lot. So I'm Seth Lyman. I work at USU's Bingham Research Center here in Vernal, and we do lots of air quality work related to specific issues here in the Uinta Basin. Today, I'm not going to talk so much about the work that we do at USU, but about the Uinta Basin Ozone Working Group that we help facilitate. And the reason is the Uinta Basin Ozone Working Group is a group of stakeholders, industry, regulators, community, that meet together occasionally to kind of talk about the air quality issues in the Uinta Basin, more from a kind of a technical level, I think. And the group meets, usually we have an in-person in Vernal with the Zoom option, and we decided, as with the steering committee of the group, to that it might be more effective if we gave brief updates in this meeting, and we asked Dagam if that's okay, and they said it would be okay, and so that's what I'm going to try to do here. And I'll give kind of a little introduction to who we are and what the Ozone Working Group is, and give some of those updates. So that's what I'll do. This is basically the Ozone Working Group's mission statement. I won't read it, but the idea is to bring people together to talk about and hopefully come up with ways to resolve air quality issues in the Uinta Basin. And it's been around since 2017, 2018, I think. Okay. So what we do with in the Ozone Working Group in the meetings is give kind of updates of goings on, or we'll do that here. Sorry, I'm not reading my own bullets here. Going forward in a brief way. We also, as I mentioned, have occasional meetings to discuss issues in an in-depth way, a little more technical. Some good things, I think, have come out of the Ozone Working Group. The group has sent letters to EPA and other entities to request action on different issues. The group has come up with and kind of guided ozone or air quality forecast program for the winter, and I'll talk a little more about that later. And it's just a forum to understand what's happening in the regulatory world and in the technical world with air quality. So with that pitch, if you are interested in joining, basically the way to join is to email me. There's my email, the steering committee. So with the retirement of my coworker, Mark Mansfield, I was basically sort of volunteered to be the facilitator for the group, and there's a steering committee that includes folks from industry and the community and other groups, and they have some input on who joins the group, but basically just send me an email with your name and affiliation, and we can, I think, make that happen. So we'd love to have you join. Okay, so now on to updates. I don't think Poi is here, right? Okay, so one thing that we wanted to bring up, and Poi with the Utah Office of Energy Development, I think was going to try to come, but she wasn't sure, and I promised her I'd bring this up in her stead if she wasn't here. Operators may be aware of this already, that the Office of Energy Development has funding to help with aerial methane surveys. So these are aircraft flyovers that give information about where there are methane emissions and quantify them. The program basically is that with a one-to-one match, the Office of Energy Development gives $30,000 to companies for those flyovers so that they can know where emissions are. It's a complicated URL. If you're interested, I think just Google Uinta Basin aerial leak and repair detection, and it will show up. The deadline for applications is actually tomorrow at 5 p.m. So it's a little bit late, but Poi says email her, and you better write that email down now, because you might not be remembering exactly what that says. She has a complicated last name. If you need an extension, she said that's fine and okay, just email her by tomorrow. And also email Poi if you have additional questions beyond what's available on their website. I'll leave that up for just a second longer. And I, of course, there's a lot more detail there. I'm just, don't ask me questions about this one, please, because I don't know. Okay. Oh, did it switch over here? Okay, great. Another thing that the steering committee asked me to bring up as an announcement is you may be aware of the Beehive Emission Reduction Plan. This is Inflation Reduction Act funding that EPA is divvying up to states. And Utah Division of Air Quality submitted a plan or a proposal to EPA. I heard on the news this morning, I think they're supposed to give information back to states later this month about what they're funding. But one thing that the state included in their plan is funds to pay for replacement of approximately 800 thief hatches with low emissions models. And Sheila may have more information about that when she presents later, but I'm just giving that announcement that that's hopefully happening, and hopefully this Division of Air Quality will have more information about that soon. So that'll be a big help, I think, to our basin with air quality. If we switched, okay. Another thing that a quick announcement is, and this is work that we're doing at the USU Bingham Research Center for quite a few years. Then we have a program we call Ozone Alert. So we send emails to operators. That's the intent. But anyone who signs up, we send an email to let them know in the wintertime if there's a poor air quality forecast, so that people can reduce emissions at those times when it matters the most. This late fall, then we'll roll out some improvements to that program, and through the Ozone Working Group, we'll have some information about those improvements. So get in touch with me if you want to know about that. And also, that's the URL to sign up if you want to join the Ozone Working Group. So it's literally just we send emails and say, hey, air quality could be bad sometime between now and the next few days, and reduce emissions if you can. That's as simple as the program is now. And it won't get much more complicated, just with a bigger web presence if you want more information. And you can also just email me to seth.lyman@usu.edu if you want to sign up for that. Okay. And then the last announcement that I have before I'm done is some of you may be aware that the U.S. Department of Energy has $850 million available for methane emission reduction grants. And there's a few different areas of opportunity here. My goal, our goal at the USU Bingham Research Center is to bring as much of this money to the Uinta Basin as possible, because, I mean, in a self-serving way, we do research in this area, and so that might help us for some of those. But in a bigger way, our role is to improve air quality in the Uinta Basin and help others to do so. And so we want to help companies, help technology providers, and whatever, get as much of that money here as we can. And those the funds that are available can support things like technology development that will lead to reduced methane emissions, and also leak detection and monitoring. There's a lot of details, but I would be happy to point you in the right direction. We are partnering in a few different ways with some different entities on some of those, on some applications for this. But of course, you don't have to partner with us in order to send in an application. They're due in about a month, a little over a month. So and a Department of Energy funding application is not something that happens quickly. So if you're interested in this, I encourage you to jump on it soon. And through Utah Petroleum Association, we've reached out, or they've reached out to many already. But anyway, that's something to know about, and we hope to get as many applications in as we can that bring funds to the Uinta Basin. Okay, that's all I got. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks, Dr. Lyman. We appreciate your work for air quality out here. It's been a long process we've been working on for many years, but we are making headway, so thank you. We'll now take our break till about, let's see, about 1:45, okay? So we'll meet back then. Thanks.
Check, 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 check. Check, 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 check. Check, check, check. Check, check. Check, 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 check. Check. Check, check, check. Check, check. Check, check. Check.
Okay, we're going to get started. If you
these frequencies on some of these microphones.
Yeah, I hear that. Okay. Okay, would you please take your seats and we'll get started. Okay, the next portion of our meeting is going to be a presentation by Sheila Vance from the Department of Division of Air Quality, and she's going to talk about marginal well grants and Uinta Basin attainment. So if we could all come in and settle down and we get things started. Okay.
Check, check.
Thank you.
Okay.
Cuts out, I'll bring you new ones.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Oh, can everybody hear me all right? I'm kind of short compared to John. I'll go ahead and get started. And again, I'm Sheila Vance. I'm with the Utah Division of Air Quality. And I've been coming to this meeting for quite some time now to provide regulatory updates and what's happening in terms of air quality here in the Uinta Basin. So always happy to be here. And we have some, I think, good news and interesting news to share at this point. So I'm going to first talk to, did that not advance? Oh, there we go. So yeah, we've been talking about the non-attainment status of the basin since the 2015 ozone standard came out, and we were declared non-attainment for ozone in 2018. Excuse me. So we do finally have a proposed decision from Region 8 EPA, and they have proposed that they first extended our attainment date for 1 year. So that moved our attainment date to August of 2023. This always seems to happen so slowly. We're already in the past, right? But that allowed us then to attain the standard where we had 3 years of data below the 70 parts per million ozone standard. So along with that approval of the extension, they also proposed that they've made a determination of attainment by the attainment date for this non-attainment area here in the Uinta Basin. It is just proposed. Public comment ended about May 10th. They did receive comments that they are going to have to, they're preparing to reply to. And I think they're prepared to respond to those comments adequately. And so our hope is we'll see a final decision here this fall. What that means in terms of regulatory status is kind of interesting. They've made the determination, but it'll be up to us to request redesignation to an attainment area. So we will remain in sort of a, we kind of refer to it as a marginal ozone purgatory for a while. We will stay as a non-attainment area for ozone with the marginal classification until such time we request redesignation from EPA. And to request redesignation, there are things we have to do. And part of that is preparing a maintenance plan. And that maintenance plan is designed to show EPA that we've attained the standard, and here are all the things we're going to do to make sure we maintain that standard, as well as we have to either model, like showing in the future that that number will remain less than 70, or you can also use inventory. So you can show that your inventory is going to stay the same as it was when you attain the standard. So there's some challenges there, but also I think with all the things happening and the rulemaking, our hope is we will be able to prepare that plan, request redesignation to an attainment area, and bring us back into attainment. We are looking right now at potentially a third-party contracting because our staff is pretty impacted right now with the work we're doing on the Wasatch Front and the serious ozone SIP that we're preparing. So a lot of our technical folks are pretty wrapped up. So we're evaluating that right now. I think, Wyoming, their area is still a marginal non-attainment area since about 2009, 2010. Hasn't been too impactful. There's some steps, we have to do some inventory reporting and such. The biggest thing is permitting. If there was a major source that did want to permit a new facility out here, you have to have offsets as a marginal non-attainment area. So that would be probably the biggest risk for us remaining a marginal non-attainment area. So any questions on that right now? Rikki? Okay. No. Thought I'll ask questions as we go through, so hopefully we can, yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So is the quick recap of that, you are looking to start the work on the maintenance plan, hiring a third party to do it. When do you plan to start that?
It's a process. I mean, even for us to ask for money, we are actually working on the building blocks for that right now to hopefully request from the legislature this coming year, so it would be another year down the road. So it would be looking at, probably a year and a half or so before, if we were going to work through a third party. I think we'll still try to continue to prepare. Obviously, we don't want to put too many resources towards it till we see the final action from EPA, just in case something happens. But yeah, hopefully in the next year and a half to 2 years.
Okay, thank you. We'll be happy to support any legislative ask in that regard.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot. Bob?
Yeah, at what point will the threshold, the major source threshold, change? So during this process, will the major source threshold for NOx and VOC emissions go back to 250 or stay at 100 as the major source threshold?
Well, what would happen is we would no longer be a non-attainment new source review, so we wouldn't have to have offsets. The major source threshold stays the same. It's just
through the maintenance?
It'll stay the same until such time we're redesignated. So this could be 3 to 4 years by the time we put all the paperwork together and and if EPA approves it. So it's a process. So right now we're at the 100 tons per year for NOx, VOCs, to where we would need offsets if you were above that. All right. Oops. I don't know if that's, there we go. The other thing I wanted to talk about today, and I've brought this up a couple times, like Seth was saying, there's been a lot of, the Inflation Reduction Act brought a lot of federal monies for methane reduction. And the first part of that was from DOE in combination with EPA is a grant to close marginal wells. So this was open to all states in the United States. Based upon the amount of wells you have in your state, you were provided an amount of money. So it was a non-competitive grant. We applied for it. We've received about $2.7 million. We are working on putting the application process together, and we're actually also currently, an RFQ did go out for having a third party help us manage it, because there's aspects of it that we don't have the technology. There's a methane monitoring aspect. You need to monitor for methane prior to closing the well and after. And also the actual P&Aing of it. So that is out for right now. So we're looking to have a third party look at that. The idea here is marginal wells. There's a lot of them. And I know I've said this before, and I don't mean to say that they're not worthwhile at 15 barrels a day or less, because I know that's about 75% of our wells here in the basin, actually, if you're looking at a lot of them. But the idea is hopefully maybe there's some folks out there that are really on the edge of their production is, you know, maybe 1 to 2 barrels a day or such, and a small business that's ready to be done, or those kind of aspects. Here's some money to help close a well that perhaps people are thinking about, and this would provide some help, small businesses, really low producing wells, and then we get some benefit from reduction in emissions. So it's not a huge amount of money, potentially 15 to 20 wells, but we still felt as a state it was a worthwhile objective to get that monies, especially as I'll be talking about some new regulations coming down. This may be the opportunity for folks in the next 4 to 5 years to think about having some help in closing their well.
Do you have a definition for gas wells? I know if you just.
Oh, I know, and I focus on oil. I apologize. It's 90 MCFs, thank you, to a blank, a day or less is a gas well. Yes, so that is also part of this grant as well. All right. Oh, and I did, as Seth mentioned, there are these other monies were just released, the $850 million, and we call it MERP, Methane Emission Reduction Plan. We at the state are evaluating it for any potential, but we're fairly, our staff is a little overwhelmed at this time between other grants that we're working through. So we're evaluating applying, but we're also excited to hopefully help Seth in any way we can, because I think it's a great opportunity for the basin, and we want to support that effort. So, all right, so other things going on. So we talk about Quad B and Quad C in our lingo, but this is basically some new source performance standards for oil and gas industry. These have been in the works for a couple years now. They were finally finalized and put into the Federal Register in March. So Quad B is the new standard for new sources in the oil and natural gas industry. That became effective May 7th of this year. So from that forward, sites that meet this definition need to be in compliance with Quad B. And these are sites that came into existence after December 6, 2022. So any new site that meets this definition of an affected facility needs to be in compliance with Quad B. And so new sites in the last couple of years, basically, or if you've undergone a modification, major modification. There was, of course, a lawsuit filed. Many states were a part of that. Utah was a part of that lawsuit, as well as there was a request to stay the rules, basically put those rules on hold until the law case is decided. Just last week or so, the decision was not to grant the stay. They felt they hadn't met the requirements of a request for stay. Whether that goes to the Supreme Court or they take the next level, I don't know at this point, but the stay was denied. However, the court case is still out there, and that will be determined maybe in the next year or two. But in the meantime, Quad B is in effect for new facilities. As part of that, there was another part, which is we refer to as Quad C. Well, let me just briefly, it's a huge rule. I can't even think how many pages it is. And also, it's been in the works for a couple years, and there's been changes. And so it's a huge, complex rule. Some kind of highlights in terms of, I think, the big impactive parts of the rule: zero bleed controllers and pumps. So this is where you can't use natural gas to use the energy to have your controllers work and such. So now you're looking at electricity or air or other means of powering those. Associated gas for oil wells has to be at a minimum controlled, if not sent to a sales line. But at a minimum, they need to be controlled at the 95% efficiency. There's increased LDAR requirements. There's a new requirement now where wells have to be closed under this rule, which is kind of new for this particular aspect, and have final monitoring. And then there's the super emitter program, which will be interesting to see how that even works out. But this is where third parties can become certified by EPA to report leaks to EPA, and then EPA will reach out to operators, and operators will have a time limit in terms of responding to EPA about that leak that's been reported to them. Just kind of some big level things on this rule. And then the part that'll be most impactful to us here in Utah is the fact that we are now going to be required to write a state plan to address all existing oil and gas sources. So this is where we're going to take the requirements of Quad B for new sources, and we're going to write a plan, and we're going to let EPA know how are we at the state going to enact those emission guidelines here. So these will be all sources that are in operation prior to December 6, 2022. We have 2 years to write this plan and submit it to EPA and have them approve it. The compliance date is 5 years out. So the idea being is by March of 2026, we'll have a plan to EPA that they can approve that says we're gonna meet all the requirements of the emission guidelines that they put out and how are we gonna do it. And then from there, there'll be 3 years for all facilities to come into compliance with these rules. And they're basically the same rules as Quad B, with a few adjustments. There's flexibility to show how your current program can meet these requirements. So therefore, for instance, here we have rules for tanks in terms of controls, and on the surface level right now, our rules meet the requirements of the emissions guidelines. So we can use our existing rules and just incorporate other things. So there's flexibility. So we can keep our permit by rule program for oil wells, we believe, and maybe even introduce some new permit by rule for perhaps compressor stations. Those are the things we're evaluating. There's also the ability to have a less stringent standard than what EPA's put out. There's a lot of hoops to go through to meet that less stringent standard, but that's, I think, what we'll look for when we go out for public engagement and talk to industry and others, because you can use remaining useful life of your facility and make a stance that it's so prohibitively cost prohibitive that you can retire at a later date or meet that requirement at a later date based upon cost. So there is some flexibility there that we'll be working through. As I mentioned, a big part of the rule is that we have meaningful engagement with stakeholders, so industry as well as the community. So we're working on that plan right now, and my hope is later in the summer we'll announce that plan and we'll start getting out this fall to start talking to folks about how they want to implement this rule or the concerns they have or ideas they have for how we can implement the rule. Yeah, we're looking forward to that and that opportunity to work with you guys on that. And with that, I will open up to any questions. Seth.
Sheila, can you talk about the possibility of moving back into non-attainment, whether that could happen and under what circumstances?
Oh, so that's an interesting question that I always I struggle with. I mean, technically, the Clean Air Act is very clear that if you fail to meet a standard, so we had the 2015 ozone standard and we failed to meet it, if you attain it, you've attained that standard. And that's why we had the 3 years of data that showed we were under 70 parts per million, because you use 3 years of data to determine that. And then the next year, as we all know, 2023, we saw some fairly high levels of ozone here in the basin. But in EPA's eyes, if you've attained the standard, you've attained the standard. However, this maintenance plan that I was talking about, we have to show how we're going to remain under 70 parts per million for 10 years and then another 10 years. So basically, we have to prove that we have controls in place or things in place that are going to keep us under that standard for 10 years and then another 10 years. And as part of that plan, we have to put in contingency measures. So if we do exceed the NACs, if we exceed that number, we have to have things that we're going to put in place to get us back under the standard. So technically, I think the risk is low. EPA always has discretionary authority at some point to say, you know, that, but ultimately, I think the only thing that'll happen is if they change the ozone standard. And so if the decision to lower the standard in the next year or two happens, we go through this whole process again where we reevaluate meeting that standard. So say they move it to 65, then we got to go through that process. And unfortunately, you know, with the year 2023, we'd probably not meet the standard and we'd go through this process again. But I think the risk of being that decision that we've attained the standard, I think, is fairly low. But we do have to really work on making sure we prove to EPA that we can maintain the standard. All right, well, I appreciate your time as always, and you can always reach out to myself if you have any other questions, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, Sheila. Now I'd like to turn the time over to Irene Hansen, County Commissioner from Duchesne County, and she's going to talk about the conditional use permit updates. So thank you.
Oh, the fear of giving me a microphone. The first thing we got to talk about is the car show Saturday in Roosevelt. So Friday night and Saturday, car show. You don't want to miss it. Reminds you of perfect, simple times. So come to that. A kids' entrepreneurial gathering at Old Mill Park on Friday from 3 to 5. So let's go recruit the next group of entrepreneurs to our oil and gas industry. I know Duchesne and Uinta County has always boasted one of the highest rates of entrepreneurial startups because of the oil and gas industry. So, you know, along the way, as we celebrate all the great things and things that we see and the good people that are gathered here, we also look for, you never break a clock to fix it. I remember hearing someone in very high up in politics said, if the clock isn't broke, break it. No, I said, in fact, he said, well, my dad said that if the clock isn't broke, break it. And I said, well, my dad said the people that go around doing that are troublemakers. And that particular person, I don't think, was very happy with that response. But there are times things need to be tweaked. And just especially as things change. You know, we've got good problems, but we have seen challenges. As you've seen, Duchesne County growing as one of the fastest growing energy producing counties, I think for sure in the state of Utah when it comes to oil. I think that's safe. Is that correct, Bart? I'll be corrected when I'm done talking, obviously. But so these are good problems to have, but sometimes things do need to be tweaked and looked at so that we have predictability, and we also have a way to make sure that we can mitigate extenuating things that come up. And we have ran into some, for those that live in the county, we have run into some road issues. Again, a good problem to have for the most part. We also found out that Duchesne County may have been the only one, maybe there's a couple more, but the only county that we're aware of in the United States that's a oil producer, major oil producer, that didn't have at least some kind of a local conditional use permit. And so we realized that it was important for us to have foreknowledge of what was going on so we can answer residents' questions. We're great advocates for the industry. I've got so many talking points and so many so many things that I think we all could say about the industry that's changed the lives and allowed people like myself to stay in the basin. You know, I brag about this, and I know people are sick of hearing it, but there's new people here today. You know, my centerpiece on my table is a pumper jack, and it never leaves there. It's one of my most prized possessions. I gave it away once because someone loved it so much, and I had somebody who found out that and went and got me another one and brought it to me, because it is one of my most prized possessions. But with that, I want to just give a quick update and let you know we've been having great, super good discussions. We've been holding those the last couple of weeks on Mondays. We will be having another one this coming Monday at 1:30. It is a part of the commission meeting. It's a working session. So no decisions are made, just discussion. But we invite anyone who'd like to come to be there, and we are talking about all the different caveats and things as we work together collaboratively. I like the word that was used earlier, engagement, that we work collectively and hand in hand with the industry that we so love and so support, so that we can find some win-win solutions. We're optimistic about that, and we know that everybody might not be perfectly happy when it's all said and done, but I do think that we'll find a really meaningful way to move forward and continue to make sure that our industry thrives. So with that, I don't have a lot of details today to give. We have, you know, attorneys working on things. We have planning and zoning officials. We have planners working on things, so I don't have a lot of details today. I'm sure by the next collaborative meeting we will, and of course industry gets the word out very quickly once things land. But so I don't know that I could answer any questions. We do have our other two commissioners here today. Is there anything you'd like to add, or take the mic away from me? Come on. No. Okay. With that, we look forward to visiting with each of you. And again, this is such a great event. I will be leaving the commission at the end of the year, but I plan on, I've told someone I've devoted so much of my life to the county that these are my friends and I don't have other friends. Turns out if you could never available to do anything, people dump you pretty quick. So I do plan on coming so I can still be with my friends. And with that, again, I don't really think I can answer any questions, but you can catch me afterwards. And I think I got everybody caught up on time. So we're ahead. Hey there, yes, Representative Lund.
I have a question for you. As far as your conditional use permit that you're working on, are you using any other states go by on that or any other counties? So on the conditional use permit, are you using another state's language or?
You know, we looked into that a little bit, to be honest with you. I don't think other states are quite as friendly to the industry as we are. And so while we were open to that, I think we're trying to land on something that's unique and really drives the point home of how, first of all, it will be an administrative permit. The only, if something happened that it were appealed. But other than that, we want that to be administrative so that it's very easy. One of the challenges we had, and there was no lack of willingness, but one of the challenges that we did have, in all honesty, was that sometimes we were as surprised as the neighbors when a super pad was going in. We did not know. Now, so I think just having that forethought, having that knowledge, but if you have a state you can recommend, but we found that we won't use one particular state as an example, but we just felt like we could land on something very unique just for Uinta County. We have looked at what our Uinta County has in place, but I think we can land on something very unique for Duchesne County, which we do have interesting and much, much different mitigation issues because so much of Uinta County's production is still on federal land. And all of ours, or most of it's on private. Okay, I will turn the time back over to John And by the way, you know, John gives everybody so much credit, and I think the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining, DNR, this would not happen without them, and I want to give John and his entire staff a round of applause right now. Thank you.
You know, I've been doing this a long time, and as long as I can remember, Irene has been there to support this meeting. Even back when it was in Vernal, she was great. She supports the industry, she supports the division, and she's been a great supporter of this meeting. So I'd like to give her another hand too. And when she told me she wasn't running for re-election, I thought, oh no, how are we going to get by? But I guess we will somehow, but we won't push that. So thank you, Irene. Next, we'll move on to Bart Kettle, and he has some updates from the division. So turn some time over to Bart.
Can I wander around with this one? So Irene kind of stole what I was going to start out with, and I guess I'm probably as dangerous as Irene is with the microphone. So, but a couple people, so hopefully most of you didn't really notice, we had a few technology issues today, and I'm not actually very good with technology, but I have learned one thing about it. The more stressed out I am, the more likely it is to fail. It's like it has a sensor somewhere that when I need it to work the most, it's not going to. And so that's just kind of standard protocol. But so we had a few technology issues today, and a team of people came together to solve it, to pull the meeting off with just a few kind of temporary delays. And so I want to make sure some of them get a little credit. Mindy and Melissa with Duchesne County, both helping us get everything ready, them and their teams, to help us both pull off the technology issues and pull off everything with food. We couldn't do it without them. And then from the divisions team, Matt and Charlie, both kind of trying to hide right now, but excellent job getting this going and keeping it going. So maybe a quick
accessibility shortcuts.
Oops, maybe a quick round of applause for them.
Use the tab feature navigate and press space to keep doing action.
So the update I'm going to give is on rulemaking, and there is a lot going on in the oil and gas industry, both at the federal, the local, the state level. A lot of things. There's a lot of energy surrounding it, pun intended, actually. And so I wanted to give a couple of rulemakings. I know for myself, I blame every gray hair that I've got the last couple of years, and there's a lot of them, on all of the things that we're trying to keep pace with. And I just looking around the room, a few smiles, I know I'm not the only one that feels that way. It is a little hard to keep pace with it. So with that in mind, I'm going to give just a couple of rulemaking updates that the division's working on. The first one is, we reference it as the pollution control, and that came from House Bill 377 in this last legislative session. And what it did was it gave the Board of Oil, Gas, and Mining authority to issue tax incentives on items that fall within their code or within their jurisdiction. And so we certify the tax incentive that then goes to the tax commission. At the June board meeting, we started formal rulemaking with that. I expect that that rule will be out for public comment August 1st, and then for the 30-day public comment period. And we hope to have it adopted, I believe it's at the September board meeting, but I didn't write that down. So that's progressing forward. Watch for that if you're interested in commenting. We are working behind the scenes kind of feverishly right now to get a form up and ready and to have a couple of operators submit forms and make sure we're ready to go. We hope that gets in place here in the next week, and we'll get a few forms submitted so that we can start that test process. One of the other things that we're working on, geologic carbon sequestration's been a fairly interesting subject. Recently, the legislature in 2022 directed the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining to seek primacy for Class 6 wells. And so we've been working on that. We have a draft rule that is prepared. And It's out for stakeholder engagement at this point. It's a pretty lengthy rule, 39 pages. Unfortunately, our rule has to follow the federal standards, so it ends up being a fairly sizable rule. But that's out for stakeholder engagement. We're looking forward to comments on that. Our goal is that we'll be ready to have a primacy application submitted to the EPA at the first of 2025 and have our part prepared. And at that point, we'll be waiting for the EPA to review and give us feedback on that. Along with it, we are going to have a series of 4 public open houses across the state. The first one will start in mid-September, and it'll actually be in Vernal. And then we'll conclude in mid-October in Price with those open houses. So maybe if you're interested, contact us afterwards or stay posted. We'll be given more information at those open houses at that time. And then the third rulemaking that I want to talk about is what we reference as the bonding rulemaking. So this is a rulemaking that we've been working with industry and other stakeholders since 2020 with. We're taking what we think is a pretty innovative approach to how financial assurance is done in Utah. It's based on how the operator's production is and how many lower producing wells they are. It gives the operators some ability to make decisions in their operations to kind of help with where they sit on financial assurance, and it breaks it down into tiers that then affects what the bonding amount is. Once again, we think it's a fairly innovative approach. It's a little more complex than a set number, but it also gives the operators a higher ability to affect the outcomes of that rulemaking. The bonding, a draft rule of the bonding rules went out to stakeholders this past week, and once again, I didn't write down the date, but if I recall correctly, we'll have comments due here in mid-August and then an engagement later in August. We have had, we call it a calculator, and a Q&A with operators. We went out with that last week, and so we tried to put a calculator together to help the individual operators know how this may affect their operations and to review it and get a little more detailed information. And we're looking forward to comments back on that. And so then a couple things that I wanted to cover. First being June 21st, we had a legislative tour here in the basin. It was sponsored by Representative Chu and Senator Winterton. Thank you for supporting that. And it was a little different tour in that we took and combined oil, gas, and mining with agriculture. And if I can, just going to put a shameless plug in for just a moment. I think those are some pretty important conversations. You know, I remember at the legislature, Senator Sandel saying one time, a nation's wealth starts with its natural resources. I think that's very true. And we're fortunate in Utah. We have a lot of resources. We have a lot of policy that helps develop them. But one of the things I really want to point to is if we think about energy and we think about food, we're several generations before we've seen a period where there was a shortage that we couldn't overcome. There's a lot of science. There's a lot of effort that's gone into making those reliable. And they've just been incredibly reliable for us over that time period, almost to the point where I suppose in this room probably everybody thinks about energy, and probably most of you think about food supply too because you're a little more connected. But they're so reliable that we don't really spend any time thinking about them because we frankly don't have to. But that's not a good reason not to. They're really, really critical to us. And so that legislative tour kind of explored some of the connections between the two. There's multiple nuances and connections when we think about oil and gas production. So often we think about how much it's going to cost us to heat our house in the form of natural gas, or we think about the expense it'll take us to drive our car and gasoline. But we really never think, maybe this group thinks about plastics, but not very often. We really never think about all of the products that come from it. And we almost never think about fertilizer nitrogen production in the form of ammonia that comes from natural gas through the Haber-Bosch method. Almost all of our nitrogen is produced through natural gas. And so here we have this connection. Nitrogen is probably the most critical fertilizer nutrient for agriculture production. It originates with the oil and gas industry, and there's a connection there. And so that was what the tour was centered around, was just to try and help people understand these are very interrelated activities. So often it's that way. On the surface, it may not seem like it, but they're very related. So with that, I will close by saying in September, we are planning to have our board hearing in Vernal in connection with the Energy Summit, and I'll give Travis Campbell a segue to introduce the Energy Summit with that. If there's any questions, I'll take them before I sit down. Good. It looks like I bored everybody to death.
Oh, not on yet. There we go. Good afternoon, everybody. Travis Campbell with Uinta County Economic Development. So yeah, I'm just going to quickly give you a quick update on this year's Energy Summit. I guess first of all, Uinta County, we're happy again to host this good conference. We continue to host this event just because of the support it provides to the industry and the opportunity it brings to bring so many people together and to hear the presentations, to hear those updates, and really to collaborate and to network. I think that's one of the big things I always I notice with this event is if you've been to this, you know we have this conference with our ballroom at the conference center that's typically full, but all of our smaller conference rooms and smaller spaces around the conference center usually get used up too during the summit, just for whether they're pre-scheduled meetings or kind of on the cuff, needs to collaborate and have some space. And so it's a good opportunity to get together, to network, and really to support the industry. So I guess also big thanks to everybody who helps put this together, to the elected officials from Uinta County and Duchesne County, to our state legislators, to the industry for participating, and to Rikki and UPA for all the hard work that goes into putting this 2-day conference together. This year's summit will be kind of business as usual. I think we've found a good formula for the format and the agenda for the conference. So we're not going to change that too much. All the information will be updated and new, but the format will be similar. We're working on presentations, just updates from producers. We'll have the policy and the regulatory updates from our state and federal partners. We'll also have presentations on some of the kind of the ancillary topics that go with this discussion of the oil and gas industry. So when we talk about industry growth, I think we also have to be talking about community development. So whether that's water, housing, power, education, those kind of things that go to support industry growth, we'll have some of those conversations. We have a presentation on national defense, and kind of to Bart's point, we'll have some discussion on the connections with oil and gas and agriculture, as well as the relationship between rural areas and urban areas, and how we in rural areas can better communicate and educate those for us on the Wasatch Front. So again, the focus here is really to support the industry, to bring people together, and usually a good event, usually a pretty good turnout. So with that, I've got just a basic flyer up here. You'll see that the conference is a little bit later than in the past. Oh, sorry, that changed. So we're doing this the end of September this year. Usually we do this in the end of August. Had some feedback that it gets tough with summer travel and back to school. So we pushed this back a few weeks. So we'll have the conference September 25th and 26th. Again, in Vernal at the Uinta Conference Center. The registration for the conference is open. We'll leave this QR code up. I've got some paper flyers too, if that's helpful. But the dedicated website is just basinenergysummit.com. You can go there, get registered. If you want to support the conference, which as a county a county event, we're always looking for sponsorship and support to help put this on. So all that can be done through the summit's website, and then the detailed agenda will be up there very soon too, so you can check that out. But again, you can scan the QR code, or if you need a hard copy, let me know. And with that, I think that kind of wraps up the Energy Summit bit I wanted to give you all, but I also wanted to mention, as Uinta County's Economic Development Director, one of the other projects that I'm working on is putting together an economic development strategic plan for Uinta County. So this is a big project that we're putting together, something we don't currently have, but something that we need as we continue to grow as a community, as industry grows. So we're going to put that together to really give the county and our elected officials some direction, to really give us an idea of where we want to be, how we want to grow, where we want to grow over the next 10, 15, 20 years. Part of that's going to be a lot of public engagement and feedback from the general public, from industry, from different organizations. And so some of you may see an email coming from our consulting firm. It's called Urban and Maine. So please, if you see that, it's not spam. It's coming from us. But we'll be sending some communications out with this. But it's a fairly short survey, but we want to just start engaging and communicating with key stakeholders to make sure that this plan is really well-rounded. It's good. It's got all the components we need. So I wanted to put that quick plug in too. So keep an eye out for that. You may see that coming through. With that, if there's any questions, happy to answer those. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Travis. I've been to that conference many times, and it's an excellent conference and worth going to, so support that event. Within this room right now, we have several entities. We have county, state, federal, tribal. We also have 4 legislators here, unless someone else came in. I'm missing them. We appreciate their support, as well as just private citizens. And at this time, if you notice on the agenda, we call for the collaboration, public comments. That's how this meeting originally started. So this is the opportunity to bring your issues forward if you're an agency that wants to get something out in front of this group. And so we will open it now for public comment for anyone that wants to address anything concerning the industry in the Uinta Basin. So Bart, we got microphones out there. There are no concerns at all with the industry. Everything's great. Wow, we're doing good. Okay. In that case, we'll move on. That concludes our meeting, and we're having lunch today, and it's being provided by Barefoot Baker, which is a local caterer. There are turkey and bacon wraps, ham and Swiss wraps, veggie wraps, all with salad, and everything is gluten-free except the dessert. And so we won't be setting tables up out in the arena like we normally do. We'll just outside here in the hall. So. Welcome to come back in here to eat or just take them as they go. Okay, great.
They're all set up out here in the hall. You can take it and go, or you're welcome to come back in where you can sit at a table.
Okay,
whatever's
great.
more convenient. But I'll tell you, Barefoot Baker, when I found out it was them, I'm like, holy cow, good thing we didn't put that out there. We'd have had 1,000 here.
Okay, look forward to that. So as we conclude, I want to thank all our presenters today, especially Duchesne County helping us with this venue here, our technical staff, which back there, see all that? Appreciate it, Matt. We did have some problems, as Bart alluded to, but unless you were in the background, I don't think you even noticed. So thank you, Matt. Let's give Matt a hand. And our next meeting will be November 21st. So with that, we'll conclude and go have lunch. Thank you.